In this tutorial series, we'll be going through MetaSounds node by node for the Unreal Engine, learning how to go from beginner to complicated in game-driven sounds and procedurally generated music.
Today we're going to talk about creating rest out of an array of bools. I have an array of bools here. Let's talk about how to do it. It's a pretty simple concept, and I think you're really going to like it. It gives you a lot of ability with both sound effects and music in Unreal. So first off, to create your variable, you're just going to hit this plus to add a variable like you do in a normal blueprint. And we're going to change the value in the type here. We're going to change the value to a bool, and we're going to click is an array. So now we have an array of bools. And you can see it has 0 elements in the array. We need 8 elements in the array. So now we have 8 elements in the array, and it counts 0 to 7. Which makes sense considering arrays start at 0. And when I drag this out here, now I have a reference to it on my event graph. And for the node we're talking about today, we're going to talk about the get array. So get bool array, particularly for this one. And what it is on the trigger. So when the beat happens, right, that we've established, it will pull a certain index from the array, and then you can do something with that index pool. Very standard. So we're going to drag in the trigger here, and then what we're going to do actually is drag in the value, because the count actually uses whole numbers, which is why we have an 8 here. But the value we need to start at 0, and it needs to count up to 7, right? It doesn't start at 1 like the count would. So we're going to because there is no, right, because if the count gets to 8, there is no 8 index. There's an 8 length, but not an 8 index, right? So we need to actually deal with the value here. So there's a refresher. The trigger counter on the in will have a start value, step it up by a certain amount. So in this case, we're counting in whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it will reset after a certain amount. So for the 8 values, we're going to essentially count 0 to 7, and on that, it will deliver the count and the value, and we're going to use the value, because it starts at 0, to grab the index and do something with that index. And what we can do is actually create rest, right? So how do we do that? Well, here at the very end of this audio, wherever you need the rest to be calculated, what we can do is we can actually drag off and type multiply. We're going to multiply the audio by a float. So we're going to plug the audio in there. But the float is going to come from the array, from the bool array. So the bool array, again, is a 0 or 1 value, right? Well, audio is a 1 to -1 value. So it essentially is a number value, which is why you can very easily multiply it by a float, because it pretty much is a float, right? And you can see it over here in this chart, to the 1 and the -1. So if we multiply it by 1, we're not going to affect it at all. Going to be the same number. And if we multiply it by 0, it's squelched, right? It's removed. It doesn't exist. It's 0. So audio at 0 is no sound. That's great. Which means now we can build a rhythm out of an array. So this one's going to be simple. We're going to do 4 on, 4 off, and then we're going to switch it up a little bit. So let's listen to that. One thing I want to note, you can see here from the audio envelope, because like we talked about in the previous tutorial, it pinches the sound. If you do it on the trigger, you're going to hear little kind of deadenings where there's still a little bit of numbers going on as the sound is falling off when it multiplies. And so for whatever reason, you're going to get like the first rest will have a little bit of a dead note, almost as if you're like muting a guitar string or something. That's very cool if you wanted that effect. If you don't want that effect, if you want to be a straight rest, you need to go on the on done, which is essentially making sure that you're going to get it at the end of the pinch, not the beginning of the pinch. So let's go ahead and let's look at the variables here and count with it as we listen. So my mouse was off a little bit at the beginning, but you can see we're getting 4 beats on, 4 beats off. Now we can change up the rhythm a little bit, and we can do something a little more rhythmic just by changing these checkboxes. So you can see sometimes, for whatever reason, the value isn't cleared out. So it's starting with like a cached value. That won't be a problem when you're running the audio fresh, when you've spawned a fresh instance of it. So if we, for instance, up the BPM to 160, now we get something much more rhythmic. Let's try that. You can get very fast changes in your music just by manipulating your Bool array. So you can imagine too, let's say we could easily stack this into all sorts of things, which would swap what variables are what array is being read from and stuff like that. So you could swap rhythms in real time, or you could edit this value in real time to essentially add more to it, depending on what our player's doing. Like, there's so many options there. So that's essentially how to create rest using bools, using the Get Bool Array node.
This tutorial series is brought to you by my MetaSounds Starter Pack. If you're looking for more complicated examples on how to utilize procedurally generated music and game-driven sounds inside of your projects, you might want to give it a look. More details in the description below. This is Space Dodo, where we talk about games and game development.